For the first time in 7 years, the United States government has ground to a halt. As midnight struck on October the 1st, the federal government officially entered a shutdown, triggered by a deep budgetary impasse in the Congress. This shutdown, the 21st in modern U.S. history and the third under President Donald Trump, nearly 900,000 federal workers, suspension from duty, and hundreds of thousands more working without pay. The stalemate centers on contested issues, including federal spending levels, healthcare subsidies, and foreign aid, with Democrats and Republicans locked in a high-stakes standoff. Meanwhile, President Trump has made it clear that his administration may pursue measures during this shutdown that he describes as irreversible, steps that could redefine the U.S. political dynamics and further polarize the nation at a volatile time. With an estimated GDP loss mounting daily, the stakes are high as Washington navigates this crisis. How will this shutdown reshape the American politics, policy, and the economy moving forward? I'm Salma Al-Fiki, and welcome to In Depth. And according to the New York Times, the U.S. government shutdown that began at 12:01 a.m. last Wednesday is already affecting federal workers and services, with the impact unfolding in stages. Hundreds of thousands of employees face suspension from duty or unpaid work, while museums, monuments, and agencies prepare for closures. Essential staff, such as at the active duty troops, air traffic controllers, and federal law enforcement, must continue working without pay until the Congress restores funding. Some programs, like Social Security and Medicare, remain untouched, while the Postal Service continues operation. Courts may function briefly on reserves, but could scale back if the shutdown drags on. Contractors are especially vulnerable as they are not guaranteed back pay. The standoff reflects partisan divisions, with Democrats focusing on health care and Republicans framing the dispute as immigration. New York Times notes that the duration is uncertain, recalling the record 34-day shutdown of the 2018-2019. And according to Axios, the Trump administration is using official government websites to blame the Democrats for the ongoing shutdown, sparking accusations of partisan violations. The State Department, Justice Department, the Housing and Urban Development, and the Small Business Administration all posted messages attributing the closure to a Democrat-led shutdown, with the Housing and Urban Development even labeling the Congress's radical left. The White House launched a shutdown clock, while the Small Business Administration warned that the Democratic opposition was blocking $170 million in loans to small businesses each day. Republicans have amplified the messaging on television and social media, with Vice President J.D. Vance and the House Speaker Mike Johnson seizing the crisis to argue for downsizing government. Democrats, meanwhile, call it a Republican shutdown, linking it to health care cuts. The shutdown still threatens 750,000 federal employees with suspension from duty.
Unfortunately, we are here this morning in a government shutdown that Democrats wanted.
That's only because of the Democrats. And as you know, they want to be able to take care of people that have come into our country illegally.
We are fighting to lower the high cost of living and to protect the health care of everyday Americans.
For the first time in 7 years, the U.S. government has shut down. The deadlock in Washington left federal agencies frozen, with hundreds of thousands of workers furloughed or forced to work without pay. From shuttered museums to disrupted housing assistance programs, the effects are already visible across the country. The crisis erupted after lawmakers failed to pass a funding bill by the midnight deadline. U.S. President Donald Trump blamed Democrats, accusing them of obstruction. while Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer countered that Republicans were holding the government hostage. Trump has raised the stakes further, warning off irreversible measures if his demands are not met. Analysts say the standoff is more than a budget dispute. It is a political battle that reveals deep fractures in America's democracy. Internationally, allies are watching closely. Europe has voiced concern about Washington's paralysis, while critics question America's ability to lead globally, while its government remains partially closed. The shutdown threatens to drag on, affecting everything from border control to disaster response. Ordinary Americans now face the uncertainty of missed paychecks and disrupted services, while the world looks at a superpower locked in political gridlock.
And today we are joined by two experts based in Washington to analyze the causes, the consequences and the fallout of this first government shutdown in 7 years. From Washington, Ms. Ginger Chapman, lawyer and political analyst, and from Washington, D.C., Mr. John Rossomando, a national security expert focusing on the intersection of policy and geopolitical stability, will help us unpack the evolving situation. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me here today at In Depth. Let me start off with Ms. Chapman. How does the budget deadlock reflect the broader partisan division in Washington, do you think?
Well, first, thank you, Salma, for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and to your other guests. And what today's shutdown shows is that the partisan divisions in America have become more intractable and more deep set than ever. And it also shows that right now, unlike his first presidential term, in his second term, Trump is playing hardball with the Democrats. He is saying this is not business as usual. If the Democrats hold the nation hostage by continuing this government shutdown, he is raising the stakes by threatening to continue with his reductions in force, cutting down the size of the federal government, and instead of merely furloughing non-essential employees, he is directing his agencies to see where non-essential employees can be cut from the budget and which programs that are not in alignment with his agenda can also be cut from agency budgets. And this shutdown does appear that it could stretch on longer than past shutdowns, perhaps not the record of 34 days. However, the Democrats appear unwilling to budge. The Republicans feel that their position is righteous because their continuing resolution is to maintain current funding levels, maintain the status quo, and set aside the long, difficult discussions for after the government reopens. The Democrats want to add $1 trillion in healthcare spending. They want to continue former President Biden's expansion of healthcare subsidies to middle-class Americans, and essentially they are expanding healthcare subsidies to the tune of $340 billion a year, which is not budgeted for. The Republicans are saying we need to discuss this when we have time, not hold the American people hostage to healthcare for illegal immigrants and expanded healthcare subsidies at a time we cannot afford them.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Rossomando, from a national security perspective, can you share with us, please, what are the immediate risks of a shutdown, please?
Well, the Defense Department, CIA, and organizations like that will continue to operate. I think that this is terrible public relations for the United States on a global level. The U.S. image is that of a declining power, and the fact that we can't even get a budget because you can't get 60 votes in the Senate to, move the budget forward sends a terrible message.
Ms. Chapman, in your opinion, what do you think are the key miscalculations did the Republican leadership make leading up to this impasse? And what options do moderate Republicans have now? And could they break ranks, do you think?
Well, one thing we do see is that Trump has been very good at corralling the Republicans when he needs to. So it's unlikely that many Republicans will break ranks to join with the Democrats on this particular issue. And as your other guest noted, many of the essential government functions such as Customs and Border Control, Homeland Security, the Post Office, those are functions that are going to be, they're going to stay up and running. It is the, essentially, it's the functions that affect everyday normal Americans, the people that have to go to work, the people that rely on the government for food assistance, for housing assistance. And even though the Republicans say that things such as Medicaid will not be impacted so that everyday Americans can continue to go to the doctor, other programs, once again, that provide food, especially food for young mothers, single mothers, and their infant children, the Women and Infant Children program, that's running out of money. That will run out of money before the shutdown could end. So, and the other thing is also the federal employees. We have 3 million federal employees. Trump is trying to cut them down. Just this week, we had 100,000 federal employees resign under one of his programs. However, we have about 200,000 to 300,000 federal employees whose jobs are at risk because of the threat to eliminate them during the shutdown. And we also have hundreds of thousands of employees, around 750,000 employees that are now going to be working without any pay until this is resolved. So for the Republicans, this runs the danger of injuring their supporters. It's very difficult to continue working and not know when your next paycheck is going to arrive, if you can pay bills. So this could get very, very messy for both the Republicans and the Democrats. However, I believe the Democrats will cave in and break first, only because their position is health care for illegals at a time that Americans are feeling an economic pinch and are very worried about their own finances, and at a time that Americans can hardly afford health care for themselves. Health care is a very, very sensitive subject in America.
Yes.
So this shutdown is going to be very painful for both parties and for individual Americans.
Okay, Mr. Rossomando, with all of this happening, how are the Pentagon and the Homeland Security agencies managing their budgets and contingencies? If you can tell us, please.
Well, they all have, reserve funds that they're able to tap into during emergency. I was talking with a friend who works at Treasury, for example. She's able to continue working and drawing a paycheck because, the Treasury Department has an allocation for her department for such operations. So, things will continue as they are. The United States will continue its operations, for Homeland Security, for defense, and for its intelligence functions.
Okay, I will ask this question to both of you, but from a different perspective. I will ask Ms. Chapman, what does President Trump mean by referring to irreversible measures during this shutdown? And then I will be asking Mr. Rossomando, but from a different perspective, almost the same question. So, Ms. Ginger, can you tell us, first of all?
Well, Trump's irreversible measures, once again, he's raising the stakes, elevating the risk. Democrats, but he is threatening to cut entire programs that are very valuable and important to Democrats. A great example of this is the day of the shutdown, he cut $18 billion from green energy projects in New York City, in New York State, which is where Chuck Schumer is from. Chuck Schumer leads the biggest resistance to Trump's budget. So right off the bat, Chuck Schumer's state got an $18 billion hit. Trump is also cutting $8 billion from the 16 states that supported Kamala Harris in the election. So his irreversible cuts, he can cut large programs. Once that money's gone, it's very difficult to get that money back, especially in this environment where there's so much animosity and so much bitterness between the both sides that it's difficult to see how they are going to come together to reopen the government, much less agree on all of these hot button issues such as illegal immigration, health care, overseas funding over the next few months when they have to come up with the budget, the real budget for the upcoming year. And this is against a backdrop of many Americans losing their jobs, increasing unemployment, the housing market is tanking. So Trump is targeting Democrat programs. Once again, $18 billion taken away from New York City, Chuck Schumer's state, $8 billion from other Democrat states. So Trump is playing hardball, and he is going to make it very difficult for the Democrats. He is a changed man since his first term. And the Democrats are in a disarray. They're not organized. So they're going to have a very difficult time countering Trump's agenda and Trump's tactics and strategies.
Okay, Mr. Rosamando, coming back again to Trump's term, irreversible. Do you think Trump's irreversible measures could include downsizing key national security agencies?
Well, I think that they'll look at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard, the director there, has discussed reducing the size of the bureaucracy. You could potentially see restructuring, like the CIA or something like that. We're looking at redundant functions in the security state. So I think that Trump is talking about downsizing government, which is something Republicans have talked about for over 40 years since Reagan became president.
Ms. Chapman, how have both parties, if you can just share with us briefly, responding to Trump's warnings and tactics?
Well, Trump's warnings and tactics have emboldened and invigorated the Republican Party. Okay. They feel that he is someone who will get things done that they want in their agenda. And of course, this is very alarming to the Democrats because they see Trump has momentum. He has been winning in the courts. He's been very strategic. Trump previously won several Supreme Court decisions saying he could fire certain classes of federal employees. He laid that groundwork before, and now he's making good on that if this shutdown continues. Mm-hmm. So Trump is raising the stakes at a time the Democrats are in a disarray. Trump is never going to cut national security, customs and border control. He is going to strategically go after Democrat programs once again, the Green New Deal, renewable energy, feel-good programs, healthcare for illegal immigrants. So this is going to set up not just a budget battle, but it is going to set up a bigger civil battle, a bigger civil discourse over what are the priorities of America right now. And it should be noted that as far as wartime aggressions, Trump runs the risk of losing many America First Republicans who do not like his foreign policy, do not want the wars in the Middle East, in Ukraine. So Trump does run the risk of not just alienating the Democrats, but if he pushes too much on his foreign policy, he will anger the America First Republicans and weaken his own position. Yeah. So Trump is not just walking a fine line with the Democrat Party, but also within his own party, which is suffering deep divisions over foreign policy, even though he is mostly supported on his domestic agenda.
Okay, Mr. Rosamando, does the president's rhetoric, do you think, hint at any shifts in national security policy as a reaction maybe to the political challenges?
Well, I don't see the president changing course on anything that he's done, whether we're talking about his strong arm policies toward Israel and his statement of alliance with Qatar, his statements towards India and so forth. So I think that we won't see much change as a result of this budget over his foreign policy.
And Ms. Chapman, do you think the shutdown influenced upcoming, maybe it could influence the upcoming midterm elections or political capital for the parties?
Well, as far as the midterm elections, that is a political eternity away. Even though they are right around the corner in 2026, this budget dispute is going to be resolved by then. And trust me, there will be so many more divisions and things to argue about that will divide the two parties, both from each other and internally between now and the midterms. I believe Trump is going to try to settle his domestic agenda before then. However, his foreign policy agenda is going to continue to create divisions within the Republican Party and between Republicans and Democrats. But this shutdown, as far as impacting the midterms, by then, this will be a memory, and the American people will be bitterly arguing over many other topics between now and then.
Okay, back to you again, Mr. Rosamando. Do you think could a prolonged shutdown maybe prompt a national emergency declaration to bypass the Congress, or it won't go that far?
I don't think it'll go that far unless you have some civil disturbance or something like that. That's on a large scale, but I just think that we're not going to go in that direction.
And Ms. Chapman, what role might the courts or the constitutional constraints play if Trump moves unilaterally?
Well, unfortunately, the courts tend to stay out of this type of budget dispute because of separation of powers, things that have to do internally with the legislature. The courts tend to say that's up to them. They have their rules of procedure. So the courts will not be any help as far as the shutdown itself. The courts may be able to adjudicate certain specific disputes, such as should some money go to the Women and Children program, something specific like that. The court could step in. Keep in mind that the courts will also be under their own budget constraints, so the courts may not be able to operate under their own full staffing, and because they will have budget constraints as well. The courts will not be able to step in with the legislature. And the real risk that this shutdown could extend for a very long period is because both sides are very dug in. We have a 55-45 split. We need at least 7 Democrats to move to the Republican side. It's unlikely any Republicans will move to the Democrat side. So this could be very prolonged. And as your other guests mentioned, he believes that unless there's some sort of civil disturbance like a riot, that might be what brings this to an end. However, if this does not end soon, and it does not look like it will because both sides are really dug in and intractable, then what will happen is the American people will start to suffer over about 2 weeks. After about 2 weeks, people are going to feel the economic pinch. Americans will start to suffer from other government programs being shut down. And in about 2 weeks, it will get very, very dire for both parties. They will have to come up with something, but at this point, it's difficult to see how they're going to break out of this impasse, this logjam.
Okay, Mr. Rosamando, if Trump declares certain measures as irreversible, as he says, can you tell us, can the Congress or the courts reverse them later?
Well, it would take another president to reverse them. I mean, we're talking, severe cuts to, staff in federal agencies that the president deems is not essential. Now that he has the authority to do so, I think that's what's going to be irreversible. Some people who are now quote unquote furloughed
Yeah.
will find themselves unemployed.
Yes. Okay. And Ms. Ginger, in the past shutdowns, what strategies can you share with us have worked to end the stalemate? And are those actually viable now at the moment?
Well, previous strategies have really relied on public opinion, where both parties get out, they mobilize their voters to start calling in, and essentially, public opinion is what drives Congress to act. They are still afraid of their voters. However, in this sense, because of the ideological, uh, basically the deep ideological divide, it's difficult to see what will actually prompt each side to get past their own party's ideology. So this could be a shutdown unlike any other. However, one thing that we could see is Democrats and Republicans start making little side deals to further specific programs. But once again, the big problem is this $1 trillion in healthcare spending, and it's really going to be up to essentially the Democrats may have to give in. They may have to break first because they have so little political power. You asked what the legislature and the courts can do. Even if the legislature could do something right now, they are so disorganized and they are in a disarray. There's a reason the American people call them our do-nothing Congress. Even at their best, it's hard for them to get things done. So right now they are in a disarray. The American people may not be able to count on Congress to break out of this. The courts have been ruling in Trump's favor on many decisions, and they may not be able to get any cases that help them break through this shutdown. So it appears that it's really going to be Trump's force of personality and mobilizing the Republicans to strong-arm Democrats. For the Democrats themselves, it will be when their own constituents are in enough pain that the Democrats finally give in and vote on this budget. What's going to happen to break this is there will have to be pain, enough pain to cause legislatures to overcome their differences and finally vote.
Yeah. Mr. Rosamando, what precedence exists for using a shutdown as the cover for security reorganizations?
There isn't any. I mean, I think the last time we had a major shuffle of the U.S. National security was after 9/11 with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And then prior to that, you had the Goldwater-Nichols reorganization of the Defense Department in the Reagan era. So I don't think there's any precedent for using a government shutdown to do that.
And Ms. Ginger, what can you share with us? What are the potential economic consequences can we maybe expect as a result of this shutdown?
Well, the long-term economic consequences are loss of health care, insurance plans for many people, cuts in essential government services that Trump is saying are non-essential right now. These are social programs for food, help for disabled people, senior citizens. So there will be economic repercussions. However, first, it's going to start to affect small businesses that are losing income from furloughed workers, small businesses that are unable to get their loans processed through the Small Business Association. There are going to be many ripple effects throughout the economy. They're going to affect people differently. However, ultimately, the middle class, small business owners are going to be affected because some social services will continue for poor and the elderly. But once again, once this runs, if the government is shut down for more than about 2 weeks, then we are going to see widespread economic ripples across the working class, middle class, poor people that rely on government subsidies, and even wealthier people will start to feel the pinch when they try to get things done in courts, financially, and they will not be able to make much headway either. So this shutdown is going to affect all Americans. However, mostly it affects America's image. Once again, it shows that the United States is divided. We cannot run our own government. We cannot keep our own government open. Shutdowns are very common, but this time, once again, this shows a broader failure on the part of our government on many levels.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Ginger Chapman, and thank you, Mr. John Rosamando. Thank you so much both for your insights and analysis during this critical moment in the American politics. And a shutdown, once seen as a tool, has become the battlefield itself, with Trump signaling permanent change and Washington's institutions strained. The coming days may decide whether this is a momentary crisis or a turning point in power. And with that, we conclude today's episode of In Depth. And thank you so much for joining us. And do stay tuned for more updates on Q News.